Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the April meeting of the Lawrence City Council. I will call this meeting to order. And because Councilor Sullivan is not with us this evening, I will do an invocation and then lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you will, please stand. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you for gathering us here tonight. We ask that you would guide us as we do the business of the city. We ask that you would give all of us the wisdom that you would have us have as you enable us to guide and lead your people and make decisions on their behalf. We ask that all our decisions and discussions would be honoring to you and pleasing to you and in the best interest of the people of this city. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. All righty.
Anybody need a water? Mayor, need a water?
Actually, that'd be great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I'll try not to get too long-winded to need to wet my whistle. All right. As we begin tonight, the first item on the agenda before us is public participation. And we will hear from Family Promise of Lawrence County and Miss Naomi Broadway.
Hi, I am Naomi Broadway, Executive Director of Family Promise of Lawrence County. Family Promise is an organization that works with families with children experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness. Family Promise of Lawrence County is part of a national network of organizations that are working to end family homelessness. When we think of our typical image of homelessness, we don't usually imagine children in that picture. Families with children experiencing homelessness are much more likely to be staying in hotels or what we call doubled up with family or friends. Though they may have a roof over their head, they do not have a home of their own. The effects of homelessness on children can be devastating. Children who experience homelessness are 8 or 9 times more likely to repeat a grade, and 47% of children experiencing homelessness, almost half, were identified as suffering from anxiety, depression, or withdrawal. Homelessness is a traumatic experience, and at Family Promise, we aim to prevent and mitigate as much of that trauma as we can by providing a safe and compassionate place for families to turn in their times of need. Many traditional homeless shelters are not set up to allow families to stay together, particularly if they're family members of different genders. The Family Promise model partners with faith communities to provide our services. Currently, 25 faith communities in Lawrence County support Family Promise in our programs. We are the only shelter located within Lawrence County that serves families with children not specifically dealing with domestic violence. We opened last year just before the pandemic, so as you can imagine, our operations have had to adapt to the circumstances, which has included altering our services. However, we have continued serving families with children in Lawrence County the entire time through our shelter program, homelessness prevention program, and our stabilization program. We have provided temporary shelter, case management services, financial literacy, rental assistance, vehicle donations, furniture and household good donations, essential items, masks, food, and more. Every family that comes through our doors has a unique set of circumstances that led to their situation. Through our intensive case management process, We meet each family where they are to address and ultimately overcome any barriers that stand in the way of achieving stable housing and financial stability. We are a small staff of 2, but we are fortunate to have an incredible network of volunteers through our congregational partners and others in the community. Addressing and solving family homelessness is a complex issue, but we at Family Promise believe that it is possible through community support. The Lawrence County community has been incredibly supportive of Family Promise since our opening in February 2020. We would like you to consider providing sustainable monetary support to Family Promise so that we can continue fulfilling our mission of ensuring that every child has a home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Broadway.
We don't have a question, or do they?
Well, Ms. Broadway, if you're open to a few questions from members of council, sounds like we've got some to forward your way.
Yes, I was just wondering, do you have any brochures that you can hand out, or?
I don't have them with me. I didn't bring any with me. Sorry, I didn't think of that, but we do have some, yes.
Okay, because, I just stopped by your place there sometime last month and a half or so, but there was a sign on the front door. I didn't see any cars in the parking lot. Actually, there was one car, I think, in the parking lot, but I was wanting to talk to someone about how you go about making contributions to it and everything, because I helped when y'all opened up.
Right.
And I was at the point where I could make something, but it had on that note, I think you had to have appointment only to speak
Sure.
with anybody. Okay.
Sure. So our website is familypromiselawrencecounty.org. And I think I do have one of my cards I can give you too.
Okay.
And it has our phone number. And
Yeah, how many clients do y'all handle at a time?
Well, originally the plan was to be able to have up to 4 families at a time. With the pandemic, we're limiting it to 2. We currently, in the shelter. And our other programs, since they're not actually in the shelter, we can have more. We currently have 1 family in the shelter. We are probably going to have 2 a family that's supposed to be entering this week as well.
Okay.
But
Are the churches in the area still participating in that program?
yes, so the original design is a rotational shelter where for a week at a time, churches would host in their facility. However, because of the pandemic, we transitioned to a few different ways. But right now, we're operating as a static site, meaning they don't change places every week. Out of Centerpoint Wesleyan, who has covered so out of that facility is the actual shelter. All of our other church partners are then providing the meals and groceries and supplies and other kind of support to the shelter site. So they still kind of host for a week at a time. They drop off the dinners and groceries, et cetera. So there's no in-person volunteering right now, though we're working on when we may be able to start that up again. Depends on, congregation and volunteer comfort levels, because as I mentioned, we're only a staff of 2, so we rely really heavily on our volunteers.
Yeah. Well, I was just kind of concerned because I knew when it opened up that there was going to be families staying at different churches or whatever at night, and then come over the daytime to do their laundry and take showers and things of that nature. And
Correct.
I just, haven't seen a whole lot down there, but I noticed you had an activity bus, or I saw one down there one day, so I was just kind of concerned, and I just wanted to refresh my memories as to
Of course.
what was going on.
It's been a much smaller, much fewer families that have actually been staying in the shelter because of the pandemic has limited our ability, but we have pretty consistently had families in the shelter, just only 1 at a time. This one's smaller, but we had a family of 6 for most of last fall. But then we've also been doing a lot more work with our rental assistance prevention program as well as stabilization. So assisting families if they've found housing and getting furniture, appliances, household goods. So we reach out to our networks both in the congregations and just the Lawrence County community in general, say, hey, we need a fridge or a stove or couches, beds, and see what we get. And we've been able to provide a lot of donations to families who have no other way to get those items.
Where are you located?
Sorry.
Where are you located?
We are located at 205 Church Street, so right down the street. And that's our day center, so we don't have a permanent shelter facility, which is the partnership with the churches of using their space for the overnight shelter. The day center has showers, computers, laundry, and that's also our offices, so that's where the case management piece takes place. And our activity bus transports the guests, the clients of the program, between our day center and the church. So,
Thank you very much, Ms. Broadway. I appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Or I should say, we appreciate it. Next on the agenda, we'll hear from Ms. Elma Morrison as a representative of our City Historical Markers Committee.
Good evening, good afternoon. I'm here on behalf of the Historical Site Committee. We are happy to present to you our first two sites to be presented to the Architect District in Columbia for review. After you have reviewed it, we hope that it will be passed, and we won't be long before we have our two historical sites. The work for us has been fun and rewarding as we dug for the sites, finding information out that needed to go, that we thought would be fitting for the site. So we learned a lot, and we appreciate the opportunity to present these two sites. So tonight, we will be presenting two of the sites to you as following. The first site is the Possum Holler. This corner on Hampton and Carolina Streets was once a center of religion and education in Lawrence, South Carolina. Bethel African Methodist Historic Episcopal Church was organized shortly after the Civil War in 1868 and comprised of one of the first total Black African American congregation in Lawrence County. It was designed by an ex-slave and local African American architect, Columbia White, who became the first Episcopal church. Columbia White, who became a trustee and treasurer of the church. Two bishops of the African American Episcopal Church has come from Bethel. In 1907, the Roman Q-Ness Revival building was constructed. Columbus White was also the architect of St. Paul Baptist Church in 1912. St. Paul was the first African-American Baptist church in Lawrence. Thomas Sanders came to Lawrence in 1895 and opened a school at a home on Hampton Street and began his teaching career near St. Paul Baptist Church. He later directed the construction of Hampton Street School, effectively known as Possum Holler School. Sanders worked tireless to increase educational opportunities for African American citizens in Lawrence, as Possum Holler site that we hope. The next site is Charles Duckett House. Charles Duckett, 1860 to 1947, a prosperous Black businessman from Lawrence, designed and built this one-story residence in 1895. The house reflects the success Duckett found in running his multiple business, including a funeral home and a lumber yard. His lumber company was the only one owned and operated by an African American in the South at that time. In addition to being a carpenter and a contractor, he took an active part in the civic affairs of Lawrence and in Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. Duckett stood for truth, honesty, integrity. He had a kind and sympathetic heart that went to all less fortunate than him, regardless of the creed or color. So these are the two historical sites that we recommend to the council to be presented for the historical site here in Lawrence County. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Council, do you have any questions? Hearing none, I appreciate that recommendation, and we will take action on that at a future council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this point, we move on to the public comment period for those that signed up this evening. We have two individuals. First, a familiar face to Ms. Morrison, Mr. Morrison.
Good evening. My name is Wilbert Morrison. I'm a concerned citizen here of Lawrence, South Carolina. To the mayor and the city council, thank you for allowing me to speak just a few minutes. On March the 29th of this year, we lost a very fine citizen, a barber and entrepreneur by the name of Willie Moody Fargy. He served the community for over 40 to 50 years in this capacity. I'm here tonight because I feel it'd be fitting that we recognize, better known as Moody, as Moody Fargy Day, which will take place in January 27, 2022. It gives us time to plan and do an activity of recognition on the back part of the Capitol, of the courthouse here, facing Silver Street, which, as most of us know, where the barber shop is located down on Silver. And we'll have such an expression of gratitude to him. That's about all I have to say. I
Thank
can
you,
leave the
Mr.
statement with the secretary, the treasurer, secretary, whoever.
Are there any questions for Mr. Morrison? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'll say for my part as mayor, it's sort of one of the perks of the job that I get to proclaim things. I don't have to ask anybody to proclaim things. I just get to proclaim them on my own. And one of the things that I like to do is recognize, bring recognition to folks that are role models in the community and the good parts about Lawrence that we want others to recognize. And so I'd be glad to issue that sort of proclamation. And I look forward to working with you and anybody else who would like to plan an event surrounding that. Thank you. All righty. Next, I believe we have Ms. Holly Weld.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with y'all tonight. Just as a real brief introduction for those of you who don't know me, my name is Holly Welch. My husband and two kids and I live on the west side of Lawrence, and my husband and I are both foresters full-time, and we also run a small vegetable farm as a family on the side. And what I wanted to do is just to come tonight and I know my time is brief, but I just wanted to kind of try to start a conversation around the growth in Lawrence County. And I think we all are very excited and see all the positive changes that have happened and are continuing to happen. And we're very excited about the positive changes for the county. But in having a lot of conversations with people about the growth and about these changes, I noticed that all the conversations are focused on the half of the conversation of the new and shiny, which is what we all as people tend to focus on, the new places to eat, the new things to do with your friends, the new houses, the new jobs. And I think that's a very important part of the conversation because we all need to have pride in where we live. And I think, like I said, we're all excited. But I feel like there's a large part of the conversation that's not being had, or at least I hadn't heard. And so I started talking with people over the last several months around the county, and I've talked with dozens of people from residents, citizens, county leaders, political leaders, law enforcement, fire, just to try to get as many people's viewpoint as possible on the growth and on the future of the county. And I learned a lot of things part of that is there's over 4,000 homes that have been planned for and have been approved for building in the county over the last 6 months or so. I've also learned that most of them are in high-density subdivisions, and most of them, like y'all know, a lot of them fall within the city limits now of Lawrence. And so in having these conversations, I talked with some folks from the school board and also learned that the schools in Lawrence District 55, all except for Waterloo, are at or near capacity right now. And so if we're talking about 4,000 houses coming into the county, which those are already approved, where do those kids go to school when those houses are built out? If you think about 4,000 homes, that's a lot of children needing to go to school. And if all of our schools are full at this point, which is what and again, I don't work for the school district, but that's what I've been told from the school district, is that those schools are at or near capacity. Are we having the conversation of where do those kids go to school? And what's that going to cost the community members to fund those new schools? I know the new high school, when that was proposed, I think was around $110 million. And so if that's one school, what's it going to cost to replace maybe all the schools or however many we need to build? I spoke with folks within the law enforcement. I spoke with Sheriff Reynolds and the city police chief in Clinton, and I haven't spoken with people in the city of Lawrence yet. But they also have the same concerns about they don't feel like they have the adequate personnel and staffing to protect the people of the city and the county now. And again, if you add thousands of people in, what does that cost to adequately equip them with the personnel and the equipment they need? And what does that cost, in turn, the residents of the county? Because ultimately, we are the ones that will fund the schools and fund the police. And I could keep going with fire and roads and EMS, and I know I don't have time to go through the whole list. And like I said, I don't want to come as being negative, because I think we all can appreciate and we all are excited about the growth. But I think that half of the conversation is just as important to focus on. I know for me, I wouldn't go buy a new car. As excited as I am about a new car, I wouldn't go buy it unless I knew exactly what it was going to cost and know that I could afford it and know how I was going to pay for that. And so I know I've been talking with people at the county level, and I recognize that you all just have authority within the city limits. So I'm not expecting you to have answers of, how many schools are we going to need and how do we afford that. But I also recognize that the decisions and the actions of the city council and the residential development being recruited and the businesses being recruited, those decisions and those actions will impact everybody within the city and also within the county, financially and also, potentially quality of life wise. And so, like I said, I don't want to come in as being negative, but I'm coming, I guess, as a concerned citizen. This is my home. This is where I do want to continue to raise my kids and have my kids hopefully stay here when they grow up. So I just wanted to, again, start that conversation and just make sure that you all are thinking about that other half of the conversation, not just the half that's the new and shiny half, but also, what's this going to cost and how are we as a city and as a county going to pay for that long term? So I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Welch. I will inform you, from my part, that conversation is being had and has been had for quite some time. The situation in the city of Lawrence is significantly different from the situation in Lawrence County. And one of the reasons that there is interest in the city of Lawrence in particular is because we do have planning in place. We do have zoning, unlike the county, that provides some level of control, not to squelch private development, but to make sure that the growth that we have is not uncontrolled growth. With that said, I might take issue with your analogy somewhat, because it's not that the city of Lawrence is going out and buying a new subdivision. There are private property holders who are selling property, and you have two other private developers, and that is their right to do. But thankfully, we have a planning commission that is able to work both as a planning commission in conjunction with our zoning laws, in conjunction with my vision, and the priorities that have been set by this council to make sure that the growth that we have is not that sort of cancerous, uncontrolled growth. To your point about the schools, we actually have a meeting scheduled with the school district within the next 2 weeks to discuss that exact point. And that came as a result of the folks from leaders on county council and from myself saying, we're aware of the growth that's happening. It is time for the school district to take up that issue again, to look at what our needs are and approach them from a comprehensive standpoint. So I guess to your point, I don't want there to be undue concern because while the county may be at a certain stage, I would wager to say that the city of Lawrence is in pretty darn good shape in terms of the planning that we're doing. And that's a plan that continues to be tailored to make sure that we're not just going after the bright, shiny objects. To that point, there was a subdivision recently that was interested in locating here, and they were wanting to have sort of the postage stamp size lots and sort of lowest quality, lowest common denominator sort of approach. And I think that if they're going to be in the city, that they need to fit within the standards of our law, that we shouldn't pursue variances for things like that. So all that said, from the city standpoint, I think we can rest easy at night. And as far as the county goes and the school system goes, we're having that conversation. In fact, we're driving that conversation to make sure that there is adequate planning in place. But we do need our community partners like the school district to do their part. We do need the county to do its part so that we don't have land use that is uncontrolled and cancerous. Because as long as private property owners have private property rights, we can't just say the door's shut, go somewhere else.
Is it appropriate to ask questions or not?
Well,
If not, it's fine.
I would be glad to meet with you afterward and answer any questions you may have.
Okay.
I felt the need to be able to respond to that in real time, simply because I know that I can hear your voice that you're coming at this as a concern by there, and I appreciate that. So thank you. Thank you for those comments. All righty. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, that we have proclamations and commendations. I do have a proclamation, and I will, for the sake of time, give you the short version, which is that we are proclaiming April, this month, as Child Abuse Prevention Month. And we have heard a bit about homelessness tonight, but we also recognize that often, along with homelessness, you see incidents of abuse, either through actual physical abuse or sexual abuse or neglect that can occur. And we want to bring attention to that so that we each do our part to make sure that we bring an end to that. All right. Moving on to our reports and communications. First up, we ask that Chief Lattimore give us a report from the police department.
Good evening, council, mayor. Thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I just want to take a brief second to give you all an update on what we've been doing this past year and within the last couple of months. The first thing is we have one officer out that is out with COVID. We haven't had a staff member out since January until 2 weeks ago. So I believe that our PPE precautions that we've been taking are working. Back when COVID first started, we had 1 to 2 people out almost every other week. So those numbers have dropped dramatically. So I think we're in a good position. Our officers have spent the last year going through diversity training. They've also been reviewing our use of force policy and as it relates to the duty to intervene, as well as the no neck restraint policy. So they've been doing some reviews on that. We issued that policy in May of last year. So we went on ahead and had everybody review that again. We've also been working on some de-escalation training, so all the officers have been going through that. And persons with diminished capacity, mental health type issues, altered mental status issues. So our officers have been doing a lot of training these last 11 months. And hopefully we can get more training in these areas, and that this isn't just like a one-time thing, that we can continuously go to these state-of-the-art trainings, and that way we can bring this back home. We are in the process of replacing some of our ballistic vests. They're out of date or coming out of date or of date soon, so we're in the process of replacing those. We also applied and received a small grant from the South Carolina Department of Public Safety to purchase some personal protective equipment items such as hand sanitizer, gloves, masks, and temperature scanners. So those items have come in, and now we're requesting reimbursement from the state government. So hopefully we should be getting that money back in. We have 2 new hires. One is a transplant from North Carolina. She is certified in the state of North Carolina, so she will have to attend training, a modified version of training here in South Carolina, and then she'll be road ready. And then we have a brand new officer who will have to go through the complete 12 weeks. She's finished her 4 weeks, and she's scheduled to attend training at the Criminal Justice Academy, I think in 2 weeks. So we should have her back shortly and hopefully on the road and ready to go. We are still working on the Crime Watch program. I've spoken with a couple of counselors, and we have set up a tentative meeting to go ahead on and get that going in their district. So again, if any of the other counselors would like to go ahead on and get that started, we're ready to start scheduling that so we can get out there and get the program off the ground and running. The police department has picked back up on all traffic enforcement. Due to COVID, back last year, we had to scale back some of the traffic stops that we were making because of exposure possibilities. But now that we hopefully are on the downside of COVID, our officers are back out there full force. We are working on litter enforcement, traffic enforcement, doing traffic saturations, as well as parking enforcement, as some may already know. We will not be doing parking enforcement on the square because the lot back there is under construction. So once that lot back across from Stevens opens back up, then we'll go back to the enforcement on the square. But please just remember that, try to stay there 2 hours and then leave so that somebody else can use that park. Now that we're on the back end of COVID again, we're looking at starting our community integration program, and I spoke a little bit on that last year, and that is where we bring in new officers and integrate them into the community. So the first week that they're with us, they'll go out into the community and work with different organizations and things like that so that they can become acclimated to who we are and how we do business. I think it would be a good program, and I've had some other chiefs in other parts of the state say that they've had a lot of success with it. So hopefully that's something that we can implement and that will be beneficial to the department and the community. We will begin having cases heard in court, or excuse me, we began having cases being held in court on Monday. Because of COVID, the cases were pushed out of the courts and we were taking guilty pleas, but now we're going back to in-person. We're working to go ahead on and get a jury trial docket together so that we can start getting some of those back jury trials adjudicated through the system, as well as the citations that were written during COVID. We have a lot of citations that were issued during COVID that we could not hear because the courts were closed. So now that we're back up and running, we'll be holding court twice a day now, and we can get some of those cases cleared out. Again, traffic citations and parking. And then I just wanted to briefly comment on Ms. Welch's concerns. From a public safety standpoint, we are planning for that growth. We understand that if 4,000 homes came in today, we would not be ready. So we are actively working. We are getting together with law enforcement throughout the county to try to hold some sort of hiring event so that we can start getting more applications and then begin to prepare for, hopefully, the influx of people that we'll have coming. So we have been having those discussions and we are actively planning for it. That is of major concern for us, and that was one of the concerns that we immediately thought of was how can we serve and protect that many people coming into the community with what we have now. So yes, we have been working on it, and thank you for bringing that up. We do appreciate you understanding that that would be a lot of work for us to do with where we are now. So do y'all have any questions for me?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
Do y'all have any body cameras?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Do they wear them?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. It is in our policy that every officer must wear their body camera with every single interaction, whether you're getting out to help somebody change a tire or you're actively working a call for service, your body camera must be on.
Okay. I know we had already purchased some a while back.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we will hear from our Fire Chief, Bill Hughes, of the Lawrence Fire Department.
Good evening, everyone. It's been a while since I've been up here and say what's going on, but the first year we started back fire inspections. Last year we suspended them due to the virus, so you've probably seen our shifts captain, assistant chief out with some of the firemen that's been doing inspection and pre-fire plans. We started hose tests this month. On 3/11, I think it was A shift that tested. And we also did our pump test, 5 trucks. B shift did that. It's an annual test we have to do. Did confined space training, one of our drills. Trained on gas meters. One of our main things we use gas meters is carbon monoxide. We get a lot of calls now. But if somebody's carbon monoxide alarm goes off, we'll go in and check the house for carbon monoxide. And that's something we've come a long way on. We've made the public real aware of carbon monoxide. We run a lot more calls, and that is good. The big event in our department is, we received our new engine. And probably spent over a week removing equipment from our old truck, which was, by the way, 30 years old, that we replaced. And we took a lot of that equipment off and put it on this truck and got it in service, so it's in service now. And also rope inspections, that was done on C shift this time. We also received a grant, this is good news, for air packs. We're in much need of replacing air packs, and we got a state grant. It's been about 10 years since we got this grant. They suspended the grant, just started back about 2 years ago, and we got it this year. It's about $28,000. It don't go too far. We can buy 4 air packs with it, and much need of that. Any questions? I guess I do have a comment on the lady about, I talked to the mayor about it already. One good thing that the 3 subdivisions that's going to be built, we'll, eventually need more manpower. That's the thing we need. But the good thing is all 3 of these are being built within 1.5 miles of a fire station. I also credit anytime you want to be within 1.5 miles of each station. And when we built stations on each side of the town was good, because where they're at now, these new subdivisions that's being added, all of them are within 1.5 miles of each fire station. So we done talked already about it, so that's one good thing. Any questions?
Bill, I was just going to ask you, you brought up the ISO and how that was going to maybe affect us on your rating, and when are you to be inspected again?
Any day now. I think the COVID, we was probably due for an inspection. I'm just waiting on the call. But, the COVID, I think, held, they suspended their inspections too, so I think about any time. But what you was asking about the subdivisions, I guess, or?
Well, yeah, but you already explained that to us, that they go be within where the fire stations are now, and I just wanted to know that, I was just concerned that hopefully that we'll maintain our iOS rating we have now, which is still 1, and which is, we're proud that the city of Lawrence has that ISO rating, because we're just a few in number that in the state that's rated with 1, and I just appreciate the job that you're doing, keeping us there and working with everything.
Well, there'll be a lot of factors involved with it, but I guess right off the bat, though, is the distance you go between the fire station. If we had some station built way out on Greenwood Road, it's possible we would have to add another station out there. But where we're at right now, that's one good thing right off the start with the location.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I will brag on our departments. We do have an ISO 1 rated fire department. It's the best you can get. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but I believe we were the smallest department in the state with that rating.
We have the least manpower. Manpower is the biggest financial part of a fire department. We have the least amount of manpower that has a class.
And so one of the things, counselors, that you'll see in the proposed budget that you have copies of tonight is we have taken significant steps from an administrative standpoint to make sure in the police budget, the streets and sanitation budget, and in our fire department budget that we have achieved what I would say for the first time in years is competitive pay to make sure that we keep and retain quality personnel in those departments. But it's thanks to people like Chief Hughes that have been able to keep fire trucks in service for 30 years that make that kind of thing possible. So thank you. All righty. Next we move to City Council reports. We did have a special note regarding the naming of a street from Councilor Campbell. So if you would like to go first.
And this is actually coming from Attorney Gary Williams. He could not be with us tonight, but asked that I read this in his stead. And it reads like this. To the Honorable Mayor Nathan Senn in Lawrence City Council. Over the course of the past 14 months, I have written weekly articles in the Lawrence County Advertiser on various honorable men and women who had dedicated their lives to the serving of our community. I am from this community, having been born in the basement of the Lawrence County Hospital, when it was on Farley Avenue enduring segregation of the 1960s. I may be part of the last generation that has personally dealt with Southern apartheid as a way of life, where we had in this city, separate doctors, waiting areas, water fountains, and we had to walk through the back doorways of the city businesses. I herewith formally request that the mayor and Lawrence County City Council members consider my request to rename South Harper Extension Mr. C.D. Beasley and Lucinda Sherman Beasley Memorial Drive. I also would request that you consider and rename 2 additional streets. First, from the intersection of Main Street and North Harper Street, beginning at the Backstreet Park, to the intersection of North Harper Street and Fleming Street to the Dr. Ralph Pusley Memorial Drive. And secondly, the street from the eastern side of the public square where it intersects with North Harper Street to the Judith and Earl Franklin Memorial Street, or the Judith, or the Judith Franklin in Earl Franklin Place, or as Franklin Street. For these respected and successful persons have been key figures to our community. Our community is in very much need of a renaissance, in that properties within our community which were once owned, occupied, are now more rental and poorly maintained. However, note that some of these properties have historical value and should be protected. You may ask why these city streets? As to the Mr. and Mrs. C.D. Beasley, the Beasleys resided on Sullivan Street, which is quite near South Harper Street Extension. Their successful funeral home, the Beasley Funeral Home, was moved from Sullivan Street to South Harper Street Extension and is currently located on the street. The church they attended and supported, the Evening Light Church of God, is located on this street. The street's name of South Harper Street Extension has little connotation other than the longer part of an existing city street. Additionally, for all of these reasons that I have in my Lawrence County Advertiser articles, and I have some copies to share with you from him. As to Dr. Ralph Pusley, Dr. Pusley resided and had his pharmacy on this street. He dedicated himself to the Lawrence community and was one of the first Black pharmacists, if not the first Black pharmacist in the city of Lawrence. Our community relied on him for advice and guidance. Dr. Pusley died in his pharmacy that fronted on this street, formerly named Back Street. His pharmacy was located on the corner of North Harper, the section formerly called Back Street, and Garlington Avenue, next to the Brown Franklin building. As to the Mr. and Mrs. Earl Franklin, much can be said about these 2 Lawrence City residents. I intend on doing an article on them at the appropriate time. They owned realty throughout the city, but more importantly, they resided on this street now known as Garlington's Avenue. The Brown Franklin building was their city residence when they died. They promoted and financially supported Dr. Ralph Pusley in his studies to become a pharmacist. They were highly respected and may have been the wealthiest individuals in Lawrence during their times. They are buried in a mausoleum in the Old Jersey Cemetery. The renaming of all these streets would provide a renewed focus point of the community residents. Mr. Brown Franklin was Mr. Earl Franklin's father, thus the building's name of Brown Franklin. Mr. Brown Franklin was a fireman for the Lawrence City Crescent Fire Unit, which was an all-Black fire department during segregation times. And it is said that he slept with the water wrench under his pillow that turned the water onto the fire. The current name of Garlington Avenue connotates danger to me. The renaming of these streets shall provide a new starting point for Lawrence City Renaissance in a section of Lawrence that is in much need of a renaissance. I respectfully request that each of you read my Lawrence County Advertiser article on Mr. and Mrs. C.D. Beasley and Dr. Ralph Hughley. You will sense my thoughts as to why all of these requests should be considered and accepted. The street names I propose are only examples for you to consider. My apologies that I could not attend your council meeting. I thank Councilperson Campbell for reading my letter. Thank you for your valuable time and consideration. Gary L. Williams, Esquire. And I will give you each a copy of what he gave me. This is what apparently was in Lawrence Advertiser.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
All right. Next item on the agenda is my report, and I do just have a few items I want to bring you up to speed on. We had a conference call today with the stakeholders regarding the Ridge Vaccination Center, and I believe this is really should be a point of pride for the city of Lawrence. They're doing approximately 200, or have done as many as 200 vaccinations a day. I think that at one point they were up as high as 250. There are 4 individuals that are administering vaccinations on the site, or vaccines on the site, and they are open 5 days a week. Right now, they've administered over 8,000 shots. Now, let me put that in perspective for you. All other sites in Lawrence combined have administered roughly 12,000 shots. So every grocery store, every doctor's office, anybody and everybody that is doing vaccines across Lawrence County have done 12,000 shots, and the Ridge alone has done 8,000. Now, with that said, we have seen a diminished volume in the past couple weeks. In the early days of the vaccination center being opened, there were issues from a national standpoint about the supply chain. I think the hospital has been sort of guarded about saying, come on, come all, we have plenty, because you don't want to have a situation where something beyond their control causes an issue there if you show up. But I can tell you, they now have same-day appointments available. You can go to the Ridge, sign up, and it is very likely that you might be able to get your shot that day. I'm making this call, and I would ask the press gathered here to make sure that the public understands that this is a blessing to this community, that we have this available, that you don't have to drive out of town to be able to receive a vaccination. And the way that we are able to get back and gather together as a community, the way I know we all would like, is if we're able to make sure as many of our population is vaccinated as possible. And so please do your research, follow your own physician's advice, but I strongly urge you, unless you've been indicated by your doctor not to get a vaccine, do what I've done, do what members of this council have done, do what the president's done, do what the former president's done, do what the governor's done, and get a vaccine. And you're welcome to do it at the Ridge. As the chief indicated, our police chief indicated, I should say, the South Harper parking lot has been paved. We're moving forward with striping that. And the CPW is going to soon receive delivery of a electric vehicle charging station, which we'll be able to include in that parking lot. I'm happy about that because when somebody pulls up and parks and charges their car, hopefully they'll come visit the Lawrence County Museum or spend a little money downtown. So that's positive improvement. It's a job that needed to be done anyway, years overdue, and now that we've done it right, and added some trees that will grow into their own. So that is a much-needed improvement that's on the verge of being finished. Our Friday Night Live program has been successful. We had sort of a scaled-back rollout because it occurred on Good Friday, and I think for obvious reasons it was a bit subdued. That's probably appropriate. But since then, we've had a terrific turnout, and it's really been a way to have a non-event event where people get into the habit of staying in town, at least on Friday night. And I think our local businesses have appreciated the support, and I encourage the public to continue to make it a habit to stay in town, at least on Friday. You'll see in the list of bright and shiny new things, there is new investment in buildings downtown. There are buildings that are currently under contract, some that have been purchased, that will see new life come into buildings which have been, for the purposes of the law, abandoned, some for decades. There are one in particular, the former Palmetto Bank building, has not had its upper floors used in my lifetime. And soon we will see construction begin on that, so that's exciting. That takes us nicely to a bit of reorganization we've done on the administrative front. Building and zoning has sort of been reorganized to have a rough division of labor, where Jeremy Hudson, our building and zoning administrator, will focus primarily on making sure that new buildings, as they are built, and renovations as they are done, meet code standards, and that we're working with those that are doing that sort of work to be proactive, so that our community grows and grows well. Brandon Roberts has been brought on. Brandon, if you'll please stand up. I'd like to introduce you. He comes to us from the private sector, but he was formerly employed by Clinton Police Department. And with that background and his knowledge of codes, and which is expanding day by day, he is going to be tasked primarily, or has been tasked primarily, with code enforcement. Last year, thank you, Brandon. Last year we announced the cleanup crackdown, and sort of put folks on notice that they had a certain amount of time to address issues that needed to be addressed, and that was effective. Moving forward, we believe that making sure that we clean up derelict buildings and address property maintenance issues is the way to make sure that we stay on track. And so Brandon will be working to make sure that we're enforcing the law on the code side the same as we would writing parking tickets. With the change that came in building and zoning, we also have a change that took place in our judicial department. The city of Lawrence now has its first full-time judge. Jackie Williams, who previously was serving as a part-time judge, is now our first full-time judge, and as the chief indicated, that allows us to hold multiple terms of court per day. It allows for some streamlining and the ability to have our various departments work better together. So we're glad to have Jackie in that role. Judge Williams, I should say. In the IT realm, our city website is currently being redesigned. I will inform the public, or remind the public, our current website already has the ability to take payments online for things like our garbage collection fee. But we look forward with the new design that is hopefully soon to be published, to have even greater availability of online services. And I want to thank Colby Rice, our IT director, for helping head up that project. Special Projects has undergone a significant change in that it will be eliminated in this year's coming budget, proposed budget, as to say. And the duties of what had been the Special Projects Department will be distributed between the Streets and Sanitation Department and Parks and Recreation. That change has already occurred. But what we found is there's the ability to take on those duties and do them more efficiently. And I appreciate Kerwin Tribble with our Streets and Sanitation Department in particular for really stepping up and being able to manage that transition and look for ways to maximize the talents of the staff that we have on hand. And finally, I do just want to bring to your attention that we are working on continuing partnerships with Lawrence District 55 and Presbyterian College. In addition to my comments earlier about meeting with the school district from a planning perspective, so that the school staff and school board is aware of planned growth, and so that we can work together to do that. We're working on fun projects like Lawrence Prom being held on the square. We're coordinating with our Parks and Rec department and the high school to make that happen. And we're also informed that Lawrence Academy is going to be holding their prom at the Lawrence Museum. And so we'll work with them to make sure they can use our downtown facilities as well. Presbyterian College has a new president, Matt Vandenberg, and he and I have had a chance to get to know one another a bit, and we're excited about pursuing a positive relationship between Presbyterian College and the city of Lawrence in a number of different aspects. But the bottom line is we're looking for the sort of relationship where PC faculty and students know that Lawrence is just as much a home to them as the city of Clinton, and that's not a either or, that's a both and. There's a countywide approach to making sure that we are putting aside old divisions and territorial boundaries and things like that to try to work together to be a county united. Which brings me to my last point, which is County Council is considering a litter ordinance. At next month's meeting, I will be introducing a nearly identical litter ordinance on the part of the city that I would ask would receive first reading. so that from the county level, across every municipality, in every part of Lawrence County, we are very clearly sending the message that we need to clean this place up, that litter is unacceptable, and that we as a community stand for the proposition that we are proud of Lawrence, and we're not going to be a community that trashes itself. I am nothing but encouraged about the direction of our community. We're running on all 8 cylinders right now, which is a good feeling. All right. Next, we move on to the consent agenda, which includes approval of the agenda published and the meeting minutes from March 16th. Do I hear a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes from last month's meeting.
We have a motion and a second. All approved, say aye, or is there any discussion, excuse me? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And the consent agenda is approved. We move on to old business, which is the second reading of Ordinance 21-03-03, which we will hear first reading, or excuse me, which we will hear from Mr. Thompson.
All right, thank you, Mayor. During your last meeting, you had a first reading on this ordinance. As you well know, the entire city is zoned, different classifications applying to different areas. We have a zoning area known as R3, which is interpreted as urban residential district. That district currently, under our zoning scheme, requires all lots to be 50 feet wide across the front, and that houses be set back 6 feet from the line. The Planning Commission, which looks into zoning matters and governs that area of our municipality, has made a recommendation to council that the 50-foot width requirement 60-foot width requirement, be reduced to 50 feet, and that the separation of houses, instead of being 12 feet, I believe, would be down to 10. In other words, a 5-foot setback on each side. You've given this a first reading in March. I'll be glad to field any questions concerning this requested revision. I suspect it has come to the Planning Commission from one or more potential or active developers wanting to get a little more leeway or squeeze a little bit more residential lots out of a given parcel of property, and I am confident the Planning Commission has studied this in detail and has made this recommendation in good faith and believes that it will not upset or undermine the spirit of your current zoning plan. So we would need a motion to give the proposed ordinance a second reading.
Do I hear such a motion?
I make a motion that we receive this ordinance 21-03-03, be accepted and put forward.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second? All right. Is there any discussion?
Mayor, on discussion, in other words, right now it's 60 feet, right?
That's correct.
In other words, a person build a house from this corner to this corner, their frontage of the house could be 60 feet. Now it's moved it down to 50 feet.
It would, correct, it
So-
would shave,
Huh? Minimum. They can go more, but in other words, so if you build a house, they go have 5 feet on each side, so it's gonna be a very front. So, but they can go deeper with it, I guess, or the lot, how deep is the lots, or basically, do we know, or?
it would be dependent, as Gary pointed out, you're shaving essentially 5 feet off each side. There are sort of industry standards among home builders. And there are sort of products that would fit within a 50, 52, 55-foot lot width. And there are products that would run smaller than that. I sort of alluded to this in my comments earlier, but there were folks who are requesting a 42-foot lot width, which would be beyond what the zoning commission recommended. And so this is sort of an effort to make sure that we have standards that are modernized, that they're in line with what is currently being built by home builders, but we're not playing to sort of that least common denominator of having the smallest possible postage stamp size lot as we can possibly fit. That was a long answer to a short question.
Well, I mean, yeah, I wanted to ask that because I can see, you know, they won't get as many of the houses as they can, but I think more people people live here now, they just got bigger yards, more house, more space. So if they go 50 feet, you know, and they build a house next to it, you're gonna have, what, 10 feet between each house, you know? So that's just close, but that's what the builders want, you know. I mean, I'm gonna vote for it, but I just want people to understand that, you know, that's what, you know, that's what these builders are gonna be building, and so, you know, but, I just wanted to point that out, so,
Thank you, Council.
that's all.
We've had some discussion before about making sure that there's housing for everybody. That not all houses that are being built are top of the price range. And so there's sort of a balance that must be struck between having standards that would become cost prohibitive to builders, but on the other hand, having no standards or extremely lax standards, which would lead to a timely discussion of uncontrolled cancerous growth. So I appreciate the effort of the Planning Commission to make a recommendation that sort of, I believe, does a good job of striking that balance.
I mean, I'm for it, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'd rather see houses, and I had these, you know, all these big condos and townhouses and all that, you know, going up in these areas, so I'd much rather see people with homes and that be satisfied with smaller yards or one thing or another, so I don't have a problem with it, but I just want to know that that's what we're looking at.
Thank you, Council. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I call the question. All those in favor of approving Ordinance 21-03-03 on second reading, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. And the measure passes unanimously. All righty. Moving on To new business, we have none. Public announcements, I think I pretty much covered it. Other than I do want to encourage everyone to take advantage of the opportunities to receive a vaccine. This is vitally important as we head into a season where we're all hoping to be able to gather together. Alrighty. The next item on our agenda would be an executive session. Council, I would ask that, given the nature of what we would need to discuss and the number of counselors who are not able to be present with us, that we table that item and return to it at a later date. Is there any objection to that? Hearing none, I move to the last item, which is adjournment.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, no. We are adjourned. Thank you.